Hello everybody, and today we are going to do a special thing. I'm going to talk English. Hopefully, everybody can understand this. For our perhaps broader audience, I am Fabian Lindé. I am the chairman of Honungsringen in Sweden. I'm also a professional beekeeper and a bee master. And for the last several years, I have had the absolutely privilege to have lots of discussion with Mr. Mike McInnes, and he has agreed to do an interview with us here. My warmest welcome to you, Mike. Uh,
Thank you
could
very
you,
much.
could you introduce
Uh,
yourself to the audience?
yes, my name is Mike McInnes. I am a retired pharmacist and I have been studying honey and its flavonoids in particular for 25 years. My interest began with sports nutrition when I was reading literature on how to fuel the body for intense exercise, football and rugby and goodness knows anything. And I was aware that the liver was not being considered. And the liver is absolutely critical because that's the only reserve fuel supply for the brain. And I knew from my pharmaceutical studies that fructose was specific to the liver. So what happens is fructose goes to the liver where it's converted to glucose and stored as liver glycogen, which is a kind of starch, which then is able to supply the brain between meals and especially overnight during sleep, because
Okay,
the brain has no fuel store.
so
It's
this
always
was
just a,
this was the start of your interest. Huh?
yes, yes. And I
It's
look,
and we get closer into that later, but
yes,
you have been fighting on the barricades all by yourself with no support for the last 25 years.
yes, in a sense that's true because the health professions and the health establishments consider liver to be just exactly the same as refined sugars in the same quantity. And that is scientific nonsense. It's just rubbish. Okay,
I
so
think it was a mispronunciation. You said the liver was the same as sugar, but you mean honey, the same as sugar?
that's what the health establishment and the health professions have been saying for about 50 years.
Yeah.
And it's completely incorrect.
Yeah.
Honey is very good.
And of course, I came in contact with you after reading your fantastic book, which is called Honey Sapiens. I recommend everybody to read it. It's a wonderful book. But you have been doing more books before that about honey.
I did two books. One was called The Hibernation Diet, which was the first one, which was based on the concept of refueling the liver before sleep. And
Mm.
honey is the perfect fuel for that process. And if you do so and provide the brain with a proper fuel store overnight, the body does not then go into stress. So you sleep properly, you recover, you rebuild tissue, and you awake refreshed in the morning. It's all
Yeah.
dependent on a continuous, steady supply of glucose to the brain overnight.
Yeah, I think they have done sort of a copy of your diet, a modern version of it. I don't remember, fruit till noon diet, I think it's called nowadays. Uh, could you do the same with fruit? If you eat lots of fruit before you go to bed, would you have the same results?
No, no, you would not, because you would have to get the concentration of flavonoids that are in honey, you would have to eat far too much fruit, because fruit is not a fuel for the brain. Honey is a fuel for the brain.
No. Yeah,
And
and
it's the only fuel supply for the brain that exists in nature, actually, compared
yeah.
to that's a properly organized fuel supply, which also has the protection of the honey flavonoids in it.
Yeah. Of course, we get back more in detail to this, but the program is about honey. But if we start with um, pure sugar or pure glucose is not very good for us as a human being. It's a very bad fuel for our body.
Yes, glucose is essential to the fuel the brain. But if you overload the brain with glucose, it shuts down the brain's fuel pump. So the more glucose you supply, the less of it goes into the brain. That's the problem with modern humans since
Yeah.
the 1970s.
Yeah, yeah, but if we go a little bit deeper into this, so it's not the fuel pump itself. It goes on pure glucose, but it's a glutamine synthesase, right?
Yes,
Yeah, is
glutamine
that so
synthetase. Yeah,
crucial? Yeah, could you explain that cycle?
yes, yes. In the body, insulin supplies glucose into the cells. It pushes them into the cell. This does not happen with the brain. The brain has its own independent pumping system, and that pump is regulated partly to some extent by insulin, but more importantly, the pump is an enzyme called glutamine synthetase. It is the most important enzyme in the human body, and it supplies glucose into the cells, which then supply the neurons. So the only way you can get glucose into the brain is via this pump.
Yeah.
And
Uh, uh, yeah.
the problem with modern humans from the 1970s onwards, when they released refined sugars into the diet, is that the pump is overloaded. So consequently, the pump fails, the fuel backs up, goes back into the body, and the brain overheats because it is an engine. And
Yeah.
consequently, the neurons in the brain, which are the thinking cells, are cooked and digested by inflammation.
Yeah, and it's there's something if the glutamine synthesase and the GG cycle don't have flavonoids, it gets a rest product.
Yes, because the flavonoids protect the enzyme
Yeah.
from the overloading of the sugars. We know this from the honeybee. When the honeybee flies, it processes 70 times the level, sorry, 50 times the level of sugars that we can tolerate. So its brains should be homogenized into neurological minestrone,
Yeah.
but they are not. They're protected by the flavonoids. And consequently, the honeybee brain is able to function and forage and check which flowers have got nectar and which haven't, and it's then able to collect the nectar and fly back to the hive.
Yeah.
So that,
Today everybody is a scientist because they can ask ChatGTP, right? So if they write in is flavonoids crucial for the brain's function, they will get the answer no. But if you ask is the enzyme glutamine synthesase, does that one need flavonoids? Then you will get the answer yes. So it's important to know that it's not the actual fuel for the brain, it's the protection for the fuel pump that is lacking in
absolutely,
modern
in
diets.
refined sugars. Yeah, it's the
Yeah.
protection of the fuel pump. That's the
Yeah.
critical factor.
So could we say to explain this to people that it's not doctors that the brain, it's not the body that gets hungry, it's the brain.
Yes, always the brain.
Always the brain. And then if we eat something sweet like candy, the brain thinks it gets a very, very good fuel.
Yes,
So you get rewarded by feeling good.
yeah,
But just after a short while, the brain realizes that this is pure glucose and no fructose. And this is a very new thing for the brain. It's a very short window of time we've been having this situation.
indeed.
Indeed. So that's why if you take a tablespoon of honey, you don't want another one after 5 minutes because the brain is actually satisfied. It don't produce hunger hormones.
Exactly. Yes, that's correct. It's um, the human body depends. The brain is the critical factor in terms of whether you're hungry or not.
Yeah,
You don't have hunger. The body can feel hunger in your stomach and so on, but the brain is the critical organ for
yeah,
measuring energy income and energy output.
yeah.
That's what it's measured.
And we've mentioned obesity. What other diseases do you get when you eat too much refined sugar?
Well, it starts off with obesity because the glucose is not getting into the brain, so it goes back into the circulation and it's converted to fat and stored. That's the
Yeah.
first process to control to keep the blood glucose relatively stable. But after a time, that system breaks down, so blood glucose goes up now, and it can't be controlled, and therefore you're now into type 2 diabetes, not the genetic diabetes, but the dietary form of diabetes, which is known as type 2 diabetes. And then over years, the system the glucose is now being prevented from getting into the brain, and consequently, we're looking at Alzheimer's disease as we go from middle age onto a later time in life. Um, uh, Alzheimer's is just simply diabetes type 3. It's diabetes of the brain. And consequently, it's all caused by the problem of the fact that too much sugar in the system shuts down the glucose pump into the brain, and the brain is short of energy, and it's constantly hungry, and it's constantly not functioning properly, which means that our cognitive faculties are in decline. So obesity is a cognitive disease, as is diabetes, as is Alzheimer's.
Yeah.
They're all similar diseases. They're all based on the inability of the body via the brain to control energy balance, which is energy consumption versus energy income, you know.
Could this also be one of the parts why so many people get ADHD and diagnosis? Because if the mother don't have the right energy balance, perhaps this spills over to the
Yes,
foster or the
yes,
child.
yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, ADHD is one of those conditions which is affected by the lack of balance between the brain and the body in terms of energy control. I mean, the other one, of course, which should be mentioned, but I don't tend to do it too much, but is autism, because this can happen in fetus.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And
But
autism is described as the autism spectrum disease because there are many types of autism. But that's very simple because if the brain is the fetal brain is being deprived of energy at 3 o'clock, um, it will be a different mechanism which is affected at 4 o'clock or
yeah,
5 o'clock,
yeah.
you know, or from day to day and week to week and month to month. So the health authorities are in denial about uh, refined sugars being involved in autism, but there's very good evidence for it.
Yeah. Yeah, it is. And you know, I'm a father of three, and Mike taught me this some year ago or something, and then it was this great sunny day. I was bathing with my kids. They had ice cream and soda, and a part of me feels bad because we want to be good, loving parents and give our children a treat. And I emailed you and said, Mike, you're destroying my life because I can't be nice to my children anymore and give them treats. And you gave me the wonderful answer that, oh, that's not a problem. Just tell them to take some honey before they drink the soda because then they get the flavonoids and some
Yes,
honey before they eat the ice
yes,
cream. And it's
yeah,
it's
yeah. And
yeah,
that system, we must keep in mind, that system is 100 million years old.
yeah,
That's how old is the honeybee. So it's been learning that selecting these flavonoids from plant life for 100 million years. So
yeah.
it's the
That's
master of controlling energy supply. And actually, the first condition of life is to balance energy income with energy output. If you don't have enough energy, you die. And if you have too much, you become obese, and then you'll not survive so well.
it's like yin and yang almost. It must be a
Yeah,
balance.
yeah, yeah. The
And
first
as long
condition of life, of all life,
yeah,
is balancing energy income with energy output. Modern humans are not doing that. They've lost the ability to do it,
yeah. So
consequently.
one could say it's almost a bit like you're allowed to eat sweets, you're allowed to eat ice creams, but
Yeah, yeah.
make sure you have the flavonoids one way or another. Yeah,
Yes, yes,
yeah,
yes, yes. So you can't take refined sugars within reason, so long as you have the backing of the flavonoids to control the mechanism.
So now we get into more familiar territory. What
Yep.
is the honey's effect, and honey versus sucrose or refined sugars?
Yes, the fundamental difference. The brain can only use glucose. The body can use glucose and fats. Muscle cells can use both. Okay, the heart can use both. The kidneys can use both, although it tends to be more glucose. So all the organs, all the muscles of the body are quite happy using fat and glucose. The brain only glucose. Now there's one exceptional time when the brain does use fat, and that is in starvation. And consequently, the fat molecules, it can use small fat molecules called ketones, and it's a survival mechanism, but it doesn't apply to a normal life or a normal human diet. It's a very exceptional method.
Yeah,
So,
and if you would and now when we talk about honey, we at Honungsringen, our primary objective is to try to fight the fake honey. So I will just name this that in all of Europe we have done new testing with a DNA method that is implying or proving that more or less 100% of all the honeys that goes around in the export market is fake. And of course, this is a crime against human health. So if you want to buy honey to have these benefits, you have to, in best case scenario, buy it straight from a beekeeper. But mostly, if the honey is from your own country, it's mostly, or at least in Sweden, it's always pure honey. So if you look at this and want to try honey, please make sure that it's uh, at least from your country. It don't has to be local, and it don't has to be special raw honey or anything. All honeys that is real honey work to this. So this is an important question. But if you would rank the benefits of honey, what are those?
the benefits of honey are that basically honey is the most anti-diabetic and neuroprotective brain and motor neuron fuel known to humans.
Yeah.
There's no other food or available from nature system that can do that. Honey does that, and that's how it's selected by the honeybee from the wildflowers over that 100 million years. So
Yes,
this is not usually known in the health establishments or by health professionals. They all tend to think that honey's almost just the same as sugar.
Yeah,
You know.
yeah, most people do, and there's a very small part of the honey that is these flavonoids.
Yes,
Uh,
yeah,
yeah,
yeah, yeah.
and those flavonoids we discussed it earlier, but say it again. What's their effect? What do they do to the body?
In terms of high levels of sugars in the circulation, which the honeybee has to an incredible degree, the flavonoids protect the brain's fuel pump,
Mm.
which is glutamine synthetase. So that is able to regulate the income of the glucose into the brain. And consequently, the brain is protected from these refined sugars, which are profoundly neurodegenerative in excess in the circulation.
Yes, and of course these flavonoids they are in lots of other things like onion and so on.
Absolutely. One of the interesting things is that honey flavonoids are much more potent than they are from fruits and vegetables and berries. And this is due to research being done at Lund University in Sweden. I have that from a research team in a personal email. It's not yet published, but this is a really, really significant piece of new knowledge
Yes,
because
could you outline that study in sort of a short way?
they were using honey with on memory studies with mice. and they found that an equivalent amount of honey was far more beneficial in terms of preserving memory than were the flavonoids from fruits and berries. That's very, very significant. And that's also connected, I think, which you may come to the lactic acid bacteria, which are an important part of the bee metabolism. We can come to that.
Yes, that is a beautiful story as well.
Yes,
Actually, bees shouldn't be able to produce honey. They should be producing mead. But by co-working with this small lactic acid bacteria that is in the flowers and in the honey stomach, they can the bacteria help bees to produce the honey. It's a beautiful process, and by doing so, they also ferment the flavonoids,
yes,
making them bioavailable.
yes. And that's because the lactic acid bacteria do not appear in the honey that we buy in the
I
store or
know,
from
yes.
the hive, but they've already done their work. And that is profoundly significant. And that again explains why honey flavonoids are so biologically available, better available than are those from fruits and vegetables. And keep in mind that fruits and vegetables are not brain fuel, whereas honey is a brain fuel
Yeah, yeah.
made by nature.
So the most important thing by a health perspective is the flavonoids, the bioavailable flavonoids.
Yes, yes.
They,
There are
they,
some other important elements. There's enzymes, glucose oxidase, diastase, and invertase, and catalase, which are all beneficial,
yeah.
very important to the honeybee, and they're also very useful for humans, but they're not as important as are the flavonoids.
No, and of course those are very sensitive to temperature. So if
They
you,
are indeed. So
yeah,
if you're heating the honey, then, I have warm tea,
yeah,
berry tea at night with honey. But if you put the honey in after you've made the tea and the temperature drops a little, then the benefits of the flavonoids are preserved and
yeah.
not seriously damaged. So that's
No, no.
important.
So the most important thing, flavonoids, it's not they are not destroyed by heat. Uh,
Not seriously. If they were heated to a very high level, yes, they would be. But if you make, for instance, tea, which I do, and then I let the tea temperature drop a little, and then I put the honey into the tea, that preserves the bioactivity of the flavonoids.
yeah.
It's not
So, and what do you think is the second most important thing about honey?
honey, and basically it's the flavonoids, then the enzymes, and then the fructose.
Yeah.
And the
Do you
fructose
think
is,
do you think that number two is the enzymes or is the fructose number two?
I think fructose probably is number two actually, because it has a balance with glucose, and that is absolutely key. It's about 1 to 1. It varies with different varieties of honey. But the fructose is key to the liver, and the liver is key to the brain.
Yeah. Can you please explain the fructose functions
Yeah.
of yeah?
Fructose it only goes into the liver, and that's important because the liver is the only fuel store for the brain, and it is quite small. Sometimes it's quoted as about 100 grams. I'm not so sure it's as high as that. But overnight in particular, between meals and overnight, the brain needs supply. If honey goes into the general circulation, sorry, glucose goes everywhere to the heart, to the muscles, and to other organs. So that reserve fuel supply in fructose in the liver is converted by fructokinase to glucose. And the glucose is then stored in the liver store, which is called glycogen, which is just a form of starch. And that enables the brain to function. If you're hungry or you missed a meal, the brain can function because the liver can supply the brain in that period. The most important period for the liver to supply the brain is overnight, because if you have an early evening meal, there's nowhere near enough glucose in the liver, glycogen to supply the brain overnight. So consequently, the brain activates stress hormones to break down muscle and to create glucose. That's a process called glucogenesis. So the liver can make glucose from protein, from muscle, but you want to avoid that because it's a stress physiology.
Yeah.
And if you do that overnight, as most people do, because they were told don't eat late, well, if you don't eat late, you're not going to have enough glucose in your liver.
Yeah.
Consequently, you're not sleeping. It's not an 8-hour fast; it's 12 hours. And consequently, the most important thing to do is then have your evening meal at 6 or 7 o'clock. But restock your liver before you go to sleep. And honey is the best fuel to do so.
Yes, it is. Have I understood this right? Because if the liver can take 100 grams of glycogen, we should then, in a theoretical model, eat about 200 grams of honey, which of course is impossible. But what the fructose in honey does is it activates the liver, so the liver sucks up free glucose from the blood, lowering blood sugar and filling up the liver, so that the brain has a secured energy source for the whole night.
Yes,
Uh,
yes,
so,
yes.
so this
When,
is
when,
important.
when the body's at rest, the liver releases about 10 grams of glucose every hour, okay? 6.5 grams of that goes to the brain. 3.5 goes to the rest of the body. So that is absolutely critical overnight. Now, if you think of having a meal at 7 o'clock, and let's say it gets 100 grams, which it probably doesn't, well, 10 grams every hour isn't going to last very long.
No,
So,
no.
so then by midnight, the brain's in stress. Says, look, there's not enough fuel for me. We have to activate making glucose from protein. That's stress physiology. Stress physiology is the physiology to keep the brain supplied in a crisis.
Yes, of course, because the brain is the boss, and
Yes.
and if it gets hungry, it don't care about the rest of the body.
No, no,
It
no.
so if you go to the gym and eat wheat stuff to get bigger, the most important thing is to eat honey before bed, because otherwise your brain is not going to rebuild muscle, it's going to destroy muscle.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's exactly right.
And what amount is enough for the brain or the liver to start this glycogenesis?
If you take a tablespoon of honey at night or close to that, that would give the backup required. It's difficult to eat more than that at any given time. So a tablespoon would do the job. I mean, I've tested this out, and consequently, you will then sleep, okay? Because
Yeah.
there's a massive epidemic of insomnia across the world. Now, one of the reasons for that, and I think it's probably the main reason, is there is never enough glycogen in the liver to supply the brain overnight. So it will activate stress physiology, which is extremely damaging and which prevents you from sleeping properly. So um, that's a
Yeah,
really, and if you're a child, you're not learning because when you're sleeping, you transfer your memories from short term to long term in the hippocampus. So you have to have an adequate supply of fuel for the brain overnight, or you don't learn.
that's a study or a test I would like to see. A
Yeah,
school that actually have jars of honey in the classroom,
yeah,
and when the kids are tired, they're allowed to eat whatever amount of honey you want, because you don't want to eat too much honey. The body says no,
no,
it's enough.
no.
That would be a
That's exactly
beautiful.
correct. Honey has a self-limiting effect on consumption, whereas glucose does the opposite.
Yeah,
Because the more glucose you supply, the less goes into the brain. The brain becomes hungrier and says, right, you need to go and eat more.
yeah.
And so you've had an ice cream, you need to have another ice cream. You know.
Yeah, of course. And young students go drink this energy drinks with
Yes,
sugar
exactly.
in,
These
and they
high
got
sugar
this
energy drinks are
high and then this low.
And also you get the low as well. Yeah.
Yeah, that would be a beautiful thing. Cryo school to have honey for the students. That would be beautiful.
Yeah. Yeah.
Uh, yeah. So we of course we will do more intense programs where we talk specifically about diseases and so on. But if you could give us a like a short run through what possible mechanism that we could get out of eating honey, or what diseases that could
We
be
would,
prevented.
it's the neurometabolic diseases because the brain is the key to human physiology and biology, absolutely the key. So the first condition that honey flavonoids would prevent if we didn't eat refined sugars would be obesity. Then there's diabetes type 2. That's not the genetic one, that's the dietary one. Then there's Alzheimer's disease. Then we should look at autism. Then we should look at cardiovascular system because the biggest risk for cardiovascular disease is diabetes. So there's interesting studies there on cardiovascular protection. Sleep is absolutely critical, and honey is key there, you know. So there's a whole variety, and then there's other conditions which are inflammatory. I mean, all neurological diseases include increased glutamate, which is the toxic material. Glutamate synthetase, which is the brain's fuel pump, converts toxic glutamate to benign and beneficial glutamine. Okay? So if the pump is not, and that pulls glucose into the brain, that's the pump, to stimulate the brain and to set things in motion. But too much glutamate is incredibly toxic. It sets off an inflammatory conflagration in the brain, which cooks and digests neurons. So basically, all of these diseases, which are neurological, some of them are purely genetic, they're not caused by diet, but they involve excess glutamate in the brain and in the circulation. So that's the key.
So the short version is just so it's very clear. You do not get diabetes from honey.
No, honey is protective against diabetes. And that
But
is,
if you have diabetes, it's not a cure.
no, it's not. It's not a cure for anything. The only thing that honey can cure is infections, skin infections, and things like that. It's a very good antimicrobial. But
And you don't get fat by eating honey because
no. Also, it improves your longevity as well, you know. But the key, I think, you know, these are all conditions which can be marginally improved. Let me give you an example of a condition which is undoubtedly involves sugars, but it is also some genetic element, and that is motor neuron disease, or ALS as it's known in America. Athletes get motor neuron disease in their 50s and 60s and so on and so forth. Now, why is that? Basically because athletes consume more refined sugars than any population in the whole of human evolutionary history. So they're incredibly fit, and when they're doing their training from the age of 12 up to 35, whatever it is. So for 25 years, they overconsume refined sugars, but they're the fittest population on the planet, but they're also the sickest population on the planet. Yeah. And that is because once they stop doing the fitness, they get that obesity, diabetes, Alzheimer's disease. These are the main conditions that they get, and motor neuron disease. Okay. Now we know that motor neuron disease, the sports science says, oh, it must be the exercise that causes motor neuron disease. Okay. Well, excuse me, exercise is profoundly neuroprotective. It is the most neuroprotective thing you can do apart from eating honey, as a matter of fact. But so what's going on here? When an athlete retires, they say, oh yeah, but they've stopped exercising. Well, the general population doesn't exercise. So there's your control.
Yeah.
The athlete's not exercising, but the athlete has higher levels of these sicknesses than the general population.
Yeah.
So what do athletes do that the general population doesn't do? They do two things. They do extreme exercise and they consume extreme amounts of refined sugars.
Yeah.
Okay. So consequently, sugars are involved. Sugars are not the cause, but they activate the enzyme that causes those athletes that are vulnerable. And the particular um, molecule is known as C9ORF72. Now, we know from work by Michael Rosbash, the Nobel Prize winner, that metformin, which controls sugars, rescues that enzyme.
Okay.
So we know there's an involvement of refined sugars. Okay. Does this mean that if you give athletes honey, they won't? No, it doesn't. But it means that for 25 years of their life, if you're giving them honey instead of refined sugars, and you can give them all the honey that they need to do the exercise, that's not a problem. But
But do they have to replace all sugars, or would it
no,
be
no,
enough
no.
to say eat
They can
three or four?
balance their refined sugar intake with with honey, where they'll get the flavonoid protection.
Yeah.
So the athletic community provide us with an absolutely potent model of how refined sugars can damage a population, even though it's the fittest on the planet.
Yeah. And it's very weird. I've been contacted. I'm a supporter of a hockey team in Sweden. I contacted them to say, do you know this? Of course, they didn't even answer. It's how do you think it has become that you, through your research and now in modern clinical trials, we can see that honey is in no way comparable to sugar.
Yes.
Yet in the broader terms, or in the media picture, or in the what we call it, pharmaceutical industry, honey is just sugar.
Yeah.
How's this come about?
Can I explain how this came about?
Yes, please.
In 1958, an American physician called Clinton Jarvis wrote a best-selling book, which claimed that honey could cure a variety of medical conditions. It was all nonsense, okay? He had no science, he offered no science, but it was very popular. It was a best-selling book. In 1960, the FDA, the Food and Drug Administration, seized the book and destroyed it. Consequently, every physician, every health professional, every pharmacist would say from then until now that honey has no benefits, or if they did say that, if they said it had benefits, they would be ridiculed. But
Yeah,
from
yeah.
about 2000, around the world, people who didn't know anything about Clinton Jarvis
Yeah.
or the FDA began studying honey for the benefits of the flavonoids. So about 2000, I was reading these studies. They were published in, all around the world: China, Japan, Korea, India, Malaysia, the Middle East, Africa, and South America. Nobody would read those studies, but they were published in Western peer-reviewed journals. And so this prejudice has prevented the population from benefiting from honey. And there are hundreds and hundreds of these studies.
Yeah.
But to this day, they're just ignored, and that's Western arrogance, if you want to ask my opinion.
Yeah, it's something about the West when we believe we have the truth, and
Yes,
then in the same we stop searching for a new truth because we already know everything, so we don't need to look anymore. But in the 80% that is the rest of the world, people are still curious and you find, because you've been sending me these reports, and I've been reading the wonderful studies.
yes, yeah, absolutely wonderful. And the West is beginning to wake up slightly. There's a very good study on bee and ant metabolism, which says this is the future for controlling for sugar metabolism, so that's one study. And there's one a lovely study in Poland, a beautiful study which shows you that honey reduces the level of amyloids and tau proteins and things like that in Alzheimer's disease. So, they're beginning to wake up, but slowly.
Slowly, but and much thanks to you, I suppose, because you're the hero that stands on the wall, shouting and shouting.
We should be shouting because, once I began to study the honey flavonoids, I would discuss with pharmacists and health professionals and so on, and they would all repeat the same nonsense. It was impossible to get anybody to think outside of the prejudice that they'd been taught when they had been at university or college or whatever. So,
yeah. And it's also very weird. I know I read your book, I think it was 2 years ago or so. I was amazed and I said, I have to contact this brilliant writer. And I sent you some email, and later on we heard each other over the phone. And you were sort of very laid back. And after a short while, you said, "Do you know, Fabian? You are the first beekeeper to show interest in my 25 years of doing this." And I believe that is, I mean, if not a crime, it's unbelievable how the Apimondia and all the big beekeeping organization. And I think there are two major problems. One is professional beekeepers don't have time to play in boards and so on. And the second one is, well, there must be some bribes or it's the same uncuriousness, because the bee organizations, you hand them evidence backed by real science, and we will put the links in the comments below so people can check for themselves. But still, they show no interest. Like you say with this with sports, why don't you have a single sport team in the world trying the thing to eat honey? Not a single one. Not in the West, at least, what I know of.
Yeah, indeed. I wrote an article which I can send you, and we can link it up with whoever is interested in it, which is based on, it's called The Honeybee Sues the British Medical Association.
Yeah.
And it explains that history in the words of this particular honeybee, which I called Apimiel, in the court, and explains why the medical professions and the health establishments are blind to this science. And consequently, this is an important moment because we're creating a video about it. And eventually the world will wake up,
Yeah.
I worry about there being enough honey in the world once people understand. Do you know if I don't travel a lot, but I do some traveling, and you go into a hotel breakfast room and there's always a jar of honey or some honey and nobody goes near it. And they're all shoveling sugar into their coffee and tea and stuff.
Yeah. It's very weird, but I think that we will see a change, and of course there will be an extreme shortage of real honey the moment people realize.
If we don't see a change, then as a species we're doomed, because the question is human cognition is the most damaged in this system of refined sugars. Consequently, I want to mention autism here, because autism was 1 in 10,000 in 1980, just at the time they started releasing sugars into the diet. Autism is now 2 in 100. It has gone up 200 times.
200 times.
Furthermore, if you watch the trajectory, it doubles every 5 years.
Yeah.
And it's now 2%. And it's about 19% in California, which is probably ahead of us. But the point is that if it doubles every 5 years, then by the end of this century, we will not be a competent species. cognitively competent species. Cognition is disappearing down the drain at
Yeah.
breakneck speed.
Yeah.
So that's really the most, I mean, you don't think of somebody who's, overweight or obese. It's actually because of the brain metabolism that this is happening. We don't make those connections, but it's all about the brain. And the brain is all about balancing energy income with energy output.
Yeah.
That's key.
As all living things are.
That everything is dependent on that. And the brain is the controlling system. Insulin is very important, and I would like that at some point we do a discussion on insulin because there's some fabulous science I want to discuss with you on that. But so modern humans are insulin resistant, so insulin is not working. So even the body is not getting the glucose that it requires. But there's also insulin resistance in the brain. We'll discuss that another time.
Yeah, yeah, and the idea is that we will make shorter programs on specific parts.
We
This is
should
more,
do.
and I would really love if you could because you have such a beautiful the book that you wrote. The name is Honey Sapiens, and it's of course a wordplay on we shouldn't be called the Homo sapiens. We should be called Honey Sapiens.
Yeah,
Um,
and if we don't change, we will become Homo insapiens
yeah.
very soon. That's
But
what.
could you tell us a little bit about your I would say idea about how we developed our big brain?
Yes, that's very interesting. There's an anthropologist I think it's Nevada University called Alyssa Crittenden, and she studies the Hadza tribe, and they eat enormous quantities of honey, and they have no diabetes, zero diabetes. Anyway, um, but they don't eat refined sugars, of course. And so, but
Yes, but
Alyssa
but that,
Crittenden wrote a paper on the evolution of the human brain and provides incredibly significant evidence that honey was the key factor in the expansion some 200,000 years ago. And I have absolutely no reason not to disagree with her. I think this is absolutely correct.
yeah, because if we were eating meat, then our brains should be running on ketos, not on glucose.
Yes, there would be periods when we did run on ketones, yes. And ketones are very interesting and very useful in certain specific conditions. But we have to explain the enormous increase in cognition and the expansion of the brain. And I think that's a really, really significantly interesting hypothesis. And I certainly agree with it. That it was that system which made the difference between pre-human cognition and human cognition, Homo
Yes.
sapiens.
So the gist of it is that we could sort of control the fire, and by controlling the fire, we could control the beehives, and by our ability to control the beehives, we have suddenly a year-round steady supply of high quality fructose with the flavonoids, of course.
That is absolutely right. And the Hadza don't farm honey; they just go for wild honey. They use these songbirds that show them the way, signal where the beehives are, and so that for me is an absolutely lovely piece of information which I learned from this academic anthropologist at Nevada University. Which
Yeah.
is lovely.
And there's also this very interesting fact because you and I have been doing a small scale test. You have been giving me secret ingredients that I've added to honey, and I've been handing them out to friends and customers and myself. We don't run the experiment any longer, but if you will see, I'm wearing glasses. We were around 10 people trying this product, and around my age. I'm 50 years, and you start getting this old eyesight. I actually didn't need to use my glass. My eyes are much better after this, but it's not good enough, so I can. But when I was eating this honey, I could read without glasses. It was fantastic. I had better eyesight than I was 30, and I had uh, friends that couldn't drive car late at night because their dark vision had went away. But when they start eating this, it was no problem. And another one had the brown spots that just disappear. We're talking about a couple of weeks eating this. Um, and then you describe that or you can describe the number one reason for blindness in the world is diabetes,
Diabetes, yes, yes, yes,
and that the first sign that our brain doesn't get enough
yes.
flavonoids and right energy is the eyesight. Could you please
Yeah,
expect upon
yeah,
that?
yeah. The- A brain cell uses 20 times the energy of any other cell in the body. That's why it's so significant. The cells of the retina, which convert light into energy, use 3 times the level of energy that a brain cell uses. Okay? So the retina of the eye is the most critical organ, if you like, affected by lack of energy or over energy. And consequently, it's over energy that's destroying the retina. And so, therefore, if you think it's the most sensitive to fluctuations in energy supply, it's so complex. And therefore, vision is the first organ, if you like, or the first function to suffer from oversupply of glucose, because then the pump is not working, the vision is not getting the energy, and it can't function properly at all. So in the retina, the cells which do the work use 3 times the energy of a brain cell, which is 20 times the energy of a body
Mm.
cell. So they use 60 times the energy of any
Yeah.
cell in the body. And consequently, the demand is so high that any lack of supply is utterly critical. You know, when you hypoglycemia just causes you'll get blood vision. You know, if the blood glucose drops, you get blood vision. That's the first organ to register
Mm.
this lack of a balance in energy supply. So we come back always to this equation. All life depends on balancing energy income with energy output. That's simple. And the
Mm.
brain is the critical organ, and particularly the retina, that suffers if there's an imbalance on either side.
Yeah.
And
And
honey, and the honeybee teaches us how to do this.
mm.
The honeybee is the most amazing species on Earth, in my opinion, possibly apart from or even better than humans. Because the ant is very good at this, but the ant only flies once in its life, so it doesn't store up energy. But the honeybee has created this energy supply, which is, if there's a God, God made for humans to consume, you know.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, So and I want to shout out, because if we're not working together, but if there are scientists or some interested sports company that want to contact you either for the secret product or just information on average, how do they contact you?
Um, I do not, my company, which is called Neuro Honey, which is this specialized product. We're working on a website. I don't have that, but I can give you my email address, and if you want to contact me, you're welcome. Shall I read it
Yes.
out? And my
So
email address is Mike.
we can put it in a text down
Okay,
below by the links.
okay,
That's not
good.
a problem. Um, well, as always, Mike, it's a pleasure and an honor to talk with you. You're truly a prophet and been putting down 25 years of your life trying to teach people. And hopefully we will get a catch-up effect that makes other YouTubers with perhaps a bigger audience than Honungsringen to find you. We will do several shorter programs, and I will do my best trying to translate this into my own programs in Swedish.
Yes.
So for
I'm,
so
I'm,
long,
I'm, I'm, I, First of all, let me say I'm very grateful to you, Fabian, because what I said was true. You know, you are the only professional beekeeper. I mean, I have one or two friends that are amateur beekeepers, but you're the only professional beekeeper that ever picked up and responded to my work. So um, I'm profoundly grateful for that. And hopefully we can continue and take it forward on that basis.
yeah, I hope so. So many thanks for today, Mike.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.